Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. Ukraine War News Update, second part thereof for the 6th of January 2024. I have a feeling I might get a little bit ranty later. I've just been putting together stuff for this video. I keep doing it at the moment and I can't help it. The world has gone crazy. Anyway, I'm going to start with Belarus. Lukashenko, according to Zelensky, I presume in his interview with Lex Friedman, said Zelensky said Lukashenko apologized in the first days of the war and said that he was not to blame for the fact that missiles were being launched from the territory of Belarus. Now, Lukashenko, he's a dictator, but he owes his position to Putin for putting him in charge of the country after that second election that he kind of, scare quotes, won. He didn't win, it was all rigged, and Putin put him there. So he's propped up by Putin. So he knows that, if I don't toe the party line, I'm going to be done for. Now, he, from a practical point of view, is not a fan of the war, I would wager, because the Belarusians are not a fan of the war, and if he makes the country support the war in a very overt way with troops, then he's going to have a bit of a mutiny on his hands. There was some estimation, was it something like only 1 in 3 soldiers would answer his call if they were sent to support Russia in the war. He's a kind of realistic person in that domain. And if you also remember, earlier on in the war, his foreign minister was, well, I'd say assassinated. He had a heart attack. He was assassinated by the Russians as a shot across Lukashenko's bow to say, look, if you start easing away from us, diverging from our direction, what we want you to do, then you're going to be next on the chopping block. So Lukashenko knows that if he doesn't help Putin, at least to some degree, then he's going to end up not just not being the leader of Belarus, but being possibly dead. So Lukashenko does as little as he possibly can to pay kind of lip service to the Kremlin and help Russia in its war. Yet they end up firing missiles, flying planes from Belarus, and he apparently has apologized to Zelensky for this. And I can fully imagine that. I can imagine that he's not a fan of this war. This war's not helping him. It's not helping Belarus, who are caught up with a load of sanctions. And you've got barbed wire and dragon's teeth going up on the border of Poland and Belarus. Belarus is becoming a pariah state on account of Russia drawing it into this war. It doesn't want to be there. So, yeah, we can, on the one hand, say Lukashenko is a dictator and he's not a good leader and yada, yada, yada. Yes, but he also understands that the more he supports Russia, the worse it is for him. And yet, the less he supports Russia, the worse it is for him. And that's his difficult position. Now, today, after this interview, quote, Lukashenko's spokesperson has denied the apology to Zelensky for Belarus's involvement in Russia's war. Quote, no apologies have been made by the Belarus president to Zelensky for the simple reason that we have nothing to apologize for, said Natalia Eismont. But I imagine it probably did happen. As someone says here, Lukashenko is crapping his pants because Putler won't save him this election, and then Belarus would fall after Syria. So he's in a difficult position going forward. How much will Russia get involved in this election? I think they probably will do as much as they possibly can. There are some that still don't see the bigger picture that Ukraine is playing against Russia. Absolutely 100%. This is why the war in Ukraine is the biggest thing in the world at the moment. It's the epicenter of the geopolitical game of chess. Okay, now Slovakia, talking of which, you've got, in fact, it's probably a good time to just bring in this idea that's a little bit later, because this then will tee us up for the next few bits. Moscow is flipping Central Europe like a pancake. So I think, Moscow won't be giving up on Belarus at all. They will want Lukashenko still in charge of Belarus, and they will do everything they can to keep him there. Moscow's flipping Central Europe like a pancake, says Edward Hunter Christie. First Hungary, then Slovakia, almost got Romania, and now Austria. So this is Herbert Kickl, who's a leader of Austria's anti-immigrant Freedom Party, the FPO, who are pro-Russia, has a chance to become Austria's new chancellor and its first far-right leader since, when was it? Oh, yeah, the end of World War II. This will be exactly what Russia wants. And we'll come on to talk about exactly what Russia wants a little bit later when we look at what Alexander Dugin has said, and how Europe, under the pressure of the Americans, under people like Musk and Trump, are doing exactly what Russia want. And this is why it's really worrying to see the EU being undermined by people like Kickle and Fitzo and Orban. Well, Robert Fitzo, interestingly, went and visited, who knew, quelle surprise, went and visited the Kremlin and Putin recently. Fascinatingly, he went missing for 14 days. We didn't sort of know much about this, but Slovakians were like, where's our PM gone? So the scandal was erupting that he had disappeared for 14 days, I think it was. But he's been good old OSINT people. Prime Minister Robert Fico vanished after his Moscow trip, but his social media video blaming Ukraine for halting Russian gas helped reveal his location. A €5,740 a night luxury suite at Capella Hotel in Hanoi, Vietnam. For context, his monthly salary is €11,200. So it was all found out from, just a little bit of... in fact, we won't go and look at the whole article there, but the picture, sorry, just from the edge of that picture there was I think enough. For 14 days, Slovakia had no official information about PM Fitzo's whereabouts. However, Deník N, Deník N, that looks to be a media organisation, confirmed his location through OSINT research. The hotel even transferred their call without hesitation to Fitzo's suite, though he didn't answer. The context is Hungary's Viktor Orban. This is interesting. Hungary's Viktor Orban and Slovakia's Robert Fico have the highest EU salaries relative to their country's average gross wages. Fico's pay is 7.6 times the Slovak average, yet the Vietnam luxury suite he stayed in is still well above his pay grade. So he went missing for 14 days. This is all controversial, but was found out when he did a video slagging off Ukraine. Okay, but bear in mind that Russia is trying desperately to overturn, obviously, Europe, to untie, to use an anagram of unite, to untie a united Europe. It's one of those things with matchsticks. If you spell out unite and say just move one match to make the exact opposite. Anyway, not very interesting. We're moving on now to the people of Slovakia. So they have been out or some of them have been out in protest against Fitzo, and obviously that's not going to be helping. The fact that he went missing and is spanking all that money up the wall on expensive accommodation. Yesterday or 2 days ago, the people in Bratislava reportedly came out in protest against Robert Fitzo's pro-Russian policies. I know I have followers from Slovakia, says Anton Gerashenko. What's your assessment of the situation on the ground? And my opinion is that, it's good to see this. Lots of Ukrainian and Georgian flags as well. But take it in the context of, as someone says, this is Bratislava, not the rural areas. So you're often going to see more disdain for a leader within the urban environment, particularly a more dictatorial leader or autocratic leader in the urban environments than their rural strongholds. So bear that in mind. I don't think they were huge. As someone says, we will keep protesting, but a good part of Slovak public is drunk by rage farming and Russian propaganda campaigns, and that's the issue. According to my assessment, it's about half and not sure where this will lead. And we're going to tie this back to what's going on in America and rage farming and Musk and sowing division. What Musk is doing in the UK right now is exactly what Putin and Xi Jinping want. It's so frustrating that Alexander Dugin has laid out a plan that Musk is going, oh yeah, tick, 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 and is doing, and this is untying our united front in defending democracy, in defending Ukraine. It's really frustrating. According to my assessment, says this person, it's about half. Not sure where this will lead. Next time we protest will be on Friday. By the way, there was a protest in Banska Bystrica too. So, this was a couple of days ago, and they're planning on doing more. It was more cities, not just Bratislava, but, the size of it. Someone says, Slovakia is lost. We in Czechia, so next door, used to be Czechoslovakia, you now got Czechia and Slovakia. We call it Western Russia now. which is really, really depressing. The strongest opposition party is clearly pro-Western and overtook Fico's party in the polls. Fico's foreign policy insanities are considered as a red herring to cover severe domestic problems due to his relatively weak coalition government and as a way to stay in power at all cost. This is quite an interesting, very common thing to do, isn't it? You either start a war abroad with someone because that unites you at home, or you don't start one, but they can often, rally round the flag. This happened in 1982, in the Falklands War. What with the 70s, back into the 70s, and you got this free marketeer Margaret Thatcher came along and trying to change everything up in the UK. Deeply, deeply unpopular. But then we went to war with Argentina, and everyone's like, "Yay, okay!" And she won that next election where it was looking like she was going to lose. You could say the same about George Bush and 9/11. And everyone was like, his popularity absolutely skyrocketed. Well, for Fico, it's like, okay, Boris Johnson was trying to do this, I think, in Ukraine, where he was getting done at home on domestic policies that were, all the controversies to do with COVID, having parties where everyone's supposed to be locked away, no one could go to the funeral of their loved ones, and yet Boris Johnson or his lackeys were like living it up with these parties all over London and whatnot. And it was all controversy, so, let's concentrate over here abroad, either in a positive way or in a negative way, as with Robert Fico. So his support for Russia, or his denigration of Ukraine, is all part of shifting the focus away from domestic policies, perhaps. So anyway, it's really interesting reading through some of these very differing opinions on how strong these protests are and what it really reflects in Slovakia more generally. Transnistria, the energy crisis there is deepening. Coal reserves at its power plant will deplete by the end of January, leaving the region without electricity. Following halted Russian gas supplies on January the 1st, Moldovan authorities are preparing emergency measures. So that is still continuing to be an issue. Then we've got Georgia. Georgian businesses and employers are to carry out a nationwide strike demanding new elections. Georgian citizens are being urged to participate in a nationwide strike on January the 15th to demand the release of detained prisoners and to call for new elections. Protest 24 posted on Facebook. I don't know whether they're still out on the streets at the moment. It's a shame if there won't be, because the government doesn't mind it if that's kind of sporadic. If it's something like Euromaidan protest, then that is a more permanent fixture, or that was a more permanent fixture that brought about the end of Yanukovych. Going to Azerbaijan, the president has accused Russia of responsibility for the crash of the Azerbaijan Airlines plane en route to Grozny. Aliyev, the president, stated that the deaths of the country's citizens, quote, rest on representatives of the Russian Federation. The crash claimed 67 lives, including both pilots. I think that's good news, not the whole disaster there, but in terms of there being a wedge now between Azerbaijan and Russia, that wedge deepening a crack there, I think that's good news. Going now to Finland and what's been going on in the Baltic Sea with the slicing of cables under the sea. Finland have been quite strong on what they're going to do with shipping and what they've done with the Eagle S. I'm not going to read this to you, but Tony Mikola here saying it's quite, frankly quite baffling how much misinformation and disinformation is being shared about the Gulf of Finland and the ships waiting to enter Russian ports. Long and short of it is, Finland aren't doing what some people are claiming, and probably Russian disinformation agents claiming that they're seizing all these ships and blah, 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 blah. The only ship currently seized is the Eagle S, a tanker suspected of dragging its anchor across the seabed and damaging multiple undersea cables, including the S-Link 2 submarine power cable and several telecoms cables. Finnish authorities have detained the vessel and are conducting a detailed investigation. There's a swirl of misinformation suggesting that multiple ships have been seized and that there is a concerted effort to confine vessels in the Gulf. This is false. Apart from the Eagle S, no other ships have been detained in connection with these incidents. The focus remains on investigating the specific damages caused and preventing further disruptions, so on and so forth. Now, meanwhile, Denmark is investigating around 20 drones spotted over a port. Police are trying to determine the exact number of drones and who they belong to. No permits have been issued for such flights. Drones, right. First of all, it's worth remembering that US viewers, you remember a couple of weeks ago, everyone was absolutely crapping it about all those drones all over the US, and then suddenly that disappeared as an issue. because it wasn't ever really as big an issue as you know, it was like almost a moral panic. It was a security panic, and I think it was best explained by, well, planes, planets. People are looking in the air because they're afraid of stuff and they're seeing things they've never seen before, but they're always up there. Blinking satellites, twinkling stars, planetary conjunctions, and planes and helicopters. And when people live quite near to a helicopter manufacturing plant and they go, look at all these blinking huge drones going everywhere, and they're like, oh no, they're helicopters, because, you know, helicopters, and all of these things. And then people with drones as well. And then people go, oh, look, people are panicking about drones. Let's get our drones out. And then you add to that panic. Was there ever anything properly to get your knickers in a twist about? I don't know. But you know, it will have a lot to do with regulation and this and that. Anyway, I think there are issues with drones, just not these widespread issues. And I'm sure there will be Russians at the heart of some of these issues. So we've heard previously that drones have been used over sensitive areas in Norway. We've heard of drones around American bases in Germany. Then there have been other incidents where people have looked into it and gone, actually, these are drones of the armed services doing like either wargaming or their own things, and we don't know about that because we're not supposed to know. But you know, there are all these other things that are going on as well that help to explain why there's so many drones. Anyway, Denmark is investigating around 20 drones spotted over a port. Police are trying to determine the exact number of drones and who they belong to. No permits have been issued for such flights. So there could well be these incidences of problematic drone behavior from either common ne'er-do-wells or foreign state actors doing dodgy things. And we're in a time where drones are easy to get hold of, and so there are going to be more and more drone issues with each passing week and month and year going forward. All the guarantors, said Zelensky, of the Budapest Memorandum security were not interested in Ukraine. That is USA, UK, Russia, France and China. They didn't hold any consultations after the occupation of part of our Donbass and Crimea. In fact, I do believe he said they don't give an S about. They didn't give an S about. They weren't interested in Ukraine. None of the Budapest Memorandum signatories. And in fact, one of them's outright invaded Ukraine. So, yeah, I think that he's got some justification for being angry about that. Right, interesting. So we've got Mike Martin, a UK MP, saying, today we call on the government to investigate, I think, is he a Lib Dem? Investigate with our allies how to seize $300 billion of frozen Russian state assets to fund Ukraine's victory. I think Mike Martin, I think he's Tunbridge Wells, is he? Anyway, he's an MP that's also got, I think he might sit on some defence committee, could be starting to put pressure on what Zelensky again said, I think, in the Lex Friedman interview, which is give us $300 billion and we will go and spend that money in the US. You know, he's appealing to Trump and the American audience there, but particularly Trump, saying, hey, if you don't just give us the frozen asset profits and underwrite a $50 billion loan to us, give us all of the frozen Russian assets to the tune of $300 billion, and we will turn that into liquid cash and we will use that to buy weapons off you guys that have given us that. So this is not US taxpayers' money or EU taxpayers' money. These are frozen Russian assets being given to Ukraine, and we spend it on you guys. What's not to like? And Mike Martin has come out in the UK, and hopefully others will do this as well, to put pressure on the government to do exactly that. There's literally no reason not to, says Tim White. They bust sanctions, they sometimes with Western components, and often via our other trade partners. It's absolutely correct and justifiable to use assets of war criminals to help defend and then repair the victim. Absolutely. Now, Taiwan has asked South Korea for assistance investigating a Chinese-owned ship suspected of cutting, who knew, a subsea cable off its northern coast on Friday, according to Financial Times. The cargo vessel Shunjing 39 was believed to have caused damage to a communications cable close to the port of Keelung. Now, the problem with Taiwan is that, and I'm kind of speculating here to a degree, but I presume most of its connectivity, or a lot of its connectivity, will come through these cables to the island from the mainland, from Asia, from China. And if they are cut, then they have to rely on satellite communications, etc., etc. But Elon Musk, apparently controlling Starlink and most of global satellite communications in that domain, is not going to help Taiwan because he is beholden to China. And this is, China's then seen what Russia has done with these cables and gone, oh, that's a good idea, we'll have a bit of that. And lo and behold, you've seen that, arguably. And alternative modes of comms for Taiwan are somewhat inhibited by Musk's predilection for Xi Jinping, China, and their natural resources, and his ability to do business in China without any strings attached. Well, there are strings attached, and these are the sorts of strings that are attached. Just a general comment next on, this is coming from Shashank Joshi, The Economist. Until recently, peacekeeping had at least stayed fairly free of geopolitical rancor. In other words, when there are issues around the world, we get together and we send like an international police force. They're not always that effective, but it does show a unity and a general belief in the rule of law and the United Nations, etc., etc. Yet in 2018, Russia and China began to abstain on UN resolutions concerning peace operations. The trend intensified after Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. I'm wondering whether international peacekeeping missions it looks like we're going toward an era of greater individualism, of little isolation, little America. Oh, we don't want to be part of the World Health Organization. Don't want to be part of NATO. We don't want to be an ally of Ukraine and helping out with all you guys. We don't want to be in charge of Ramstein. So we're just going to isolate ourselves, says Trump, in little America. And then you've got the UK coming out of the EU, and then you've got the EU being the objective from the Kremlin is to tear the EU apart, to undo it, to unravel it from the inside, maybe. So Slovakia and Hungary causing issues in the EU, and you've got China. We are moving away from this not interconnected. We're still always going to be interconnected with trade. It's going to be very interesting, though, like what the political makeup of the world will be in like 20, 30 years time, because I think we are drifting back towards a kind of chaotic individualism rather than working together in unity towards common goals, and talking about the climate, talking about these, you solve global problems with global solutions, and that's going to be harder and harder if you're opting out the Paris Accord, if you're opting out WHO, if you're opting out this because hey, we're okay on our own. Well, actually that's I think a bad way for the world to go, and it's possibly reflected in the way that it's becoming kind of politicized to have these peacekeeping forces, that there are too many people that want to opt out, too many people who are problematic, too many people who are in positions of importance in, say, the UN Security Council, like Russia having that permanent seat and invading countries themselves. It's just all a big hot mess. I don't know. The state of the world at the moment is precarious, and possibly a reflection of this is Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is expected to announce his resignation as leader of the Liberal Party of Canada on or before January the 8th. What's the 6th today? This could be very, very soon. Canada's Globe and Mail has reported this. It reported on the 5th, citing 3 unnamed sources. It remains unclear if Trudeau will remain as Prime Minister on an interim basis as a new Liberal Party leader is selected. Be interested to see whether that's Rob Carney, Chrystia Freeland, or whether he will step down immediately. But of course, Canada's a staunch supporter of Ukraine under the Liberal Party. I don't think Peter Poilievre will be nearly as supportive of Ukraine. Is very much more of a MAGA leader, and it's likely that you'll get those Conservatives taking power going forward. So, yeah, I do worry a great deal about what's going to go on with Canada. And then you've got Trump threatening for it to become the 51st state of America. Anyway, less so than that, the better. Macron, no reports, says that he said, Macron, quote, "We cannot, as Europeans, let Russia win in Ukraine. It's about our security in the international order. The question is how to support Ukraine long term so they can resist and eventually negotiate a lasting peace. No solution can be made without Ukrainians," which is all good and all correct. And we've heard him say similar things previously, so that's good. Although I'm also hearing, this is Max24 saying, Macron called on Ukrainians to, quote, "hold realistic discussions on territorial issues because, quote, only they can hold them." So, yeah, only the Ukrainians can work these out to find a solution to the conflict caused by Russia's invasion in 2022. Quote, "The United States must help us change the nature of the situation and convince Russia to come to the negotiating table, while the Europeans will have to build a security guarantees for Ukraine, which will be their primary responsibility." He warned that under current conditions, quote, "there will be no quick and easy solution in Ukraine," against the backdrop of Donald Trump's previous promises to end the war in 24 hours. The understanding that Macron here is giving, I think, is that realistic means you might have to concede territory. Now, you start becoming too overt in saying things like that, then you are doing what Trump has done, which is saying to Russia, oh, just before we go to the negotiating table, by the way, Ukraine will give up a load of stuff. So it's like I've said many times, instead of starting up here in your negotiations, you're being forced to start down here. So you have no leverage. You're like, well, the US has already given up our territory to Russia, so they're going to start there, and then we're going to go down from there. So it's really dangerous if you start doing what Trump has done, which is saying we need to be realistic. Don't say things like we need to be realistic, even if you're thinking that. And even if Trump's, even if the realistic thing is that Ukraine will have to give up some territory, and I'm not saying that is the case, but if that is what you believe, stop saying that in public, because you are damaging Ukraine's ability to negotiate from a position of power to get the most that they are entitled to. They're entitled to all, but even if you think they're only going to get half of it, don't go out and say, oh, they're only going to get half, because that's where you start, and then they only get quarter. It's really bloody frustrating. So yeah, I hope that that wasn't one of the takeaway points from there. Right, moving on to some US stuff. Yet again, my ranting got a little bit heated, or I didn't rant that much, but it did go on sometime. You can see all the tabs at the top there. I just want to end this video here, and you can go and check what I said. There's all this stuff about the US and Ukraine, and then the issues to do with damaged relationships between the US and UK and the US and other countries concerning the kind of rhetoric and the claims being made by people like Musk and his acolytes. So that, I think, pertains to global security at the moment, and it is more important than people give it credit for being. In fact, it is front page news in the UK at the moment, for example. But anyway, you can watch that later in a second video. Thanks for watching. Take care. Speak soon.